Hello, 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 beautiful people. Welcome back finally to another episode of the USL show. We are so glad to be back. Last week, we took a little impromptu hiatus. We kind of went through a little bit of nothing happened. And as we are getting to teams reporting for training, we are about to get a whole lot of everything. So we thought we would be your top news source for the people who have signed. What in the world is Las Vegas doing, and how do they have 2 record sales in 2 days? We don't know, and a whole lot more that comes with it. We are here to talk about all the free agents that are available and the ones that are already signed, and we'll get into all of it. But first, Ryan, how are you?
I'm doing well. Over the weekend, since Charlotte got a little bit of snow, I chose to do the time to set up the scarf rack in the background, and then the Wilmington Hammerheads, shrine. As you can tell, I have 2 game worn kits for those of you watching us on YouTube. But yeah, I'm excited to talk about USL League One, the USL Championship, and given how Tottenham season is going, it may not be the only championship league I'll be talking about this year.
Hey, on the bright side, Tottenham gave everybody to be something to be excited about. It wasn't because of Tottenham, to be fair, but Tamworth's school, I guess.
Yeah.
I was I was listening to the match on the way down to Montgomery this weekend, and
And congrats on your tryout too,
yeah, well, I will probably talk about that at the very end. But
because you're signing for the club and that's how you're announcing it.
I got the email that said it was not happening. They were like, "We didn't feel like you're up to the standard." I'm like, "Obviously, I know." But but I was listening to it, and the announcers the entire time were like, Spurs fans should be embarrassed by this. And I'm like, that's been the conversation for roughly the last 20 years, but okay. It's
It
fine.
was still a magic of the cup type of event, and to tie it back to US soccer kind of reiterates the importance of the US Open Cup and having these types of matchups. Like if this was Don Garber as the watching an MLS team having to go up against that team, he would very much be nervous and rather embarrassed, which is something that all like fans of Tamworth of USL Championship League One that we're all relishing of that chance to go up against an MLS side. So to tie it back into US soccer, it just kind of reiterates the importance of the Open Cup.
Well, speaking of US soccer, let's get into some news around the USL. Now, we want to start off, as we always do, of course, is with Las Vegas Lights, because last year they came on strong. They had Joey Bats. He came around, and for a turn of things, he decided to punch the league in the face a little bit and really put the league on notice. And then they lose their coach in Sanchez, and everybody says, what are they going to do next? Well, they turn around and say, Antonio Nocerino, who was the head coach of one of the worst USL teams I've ever seen. I'm
It's
sure.
my lowest ELO rating team of all time, and that's below an Antigua Barracuda team.
And for people who are brand new to the Antigua team, can you give a little context on why they are the golden standard of being the opposite of the standard?
26 games, 26 defeats. The only reason that we're seeing teams now surpass that low ELO rating is just because they're playing more games than that Antigua team played in a season.
So we are talking about a team that, according to Ryan's ratings, is worse than a team that refused to win a game. And he was the head coach. But as a lot of people have said, what do you think about this? Do you want to sit there and say, well, hi, John, how are you? The one thing with this, and you are coming right in to try to give Las Vegas fans some hope if you can, is that Miami was an absolute dumpster fire, and that there was going to be nobody that could succeed with that. genuinely the only coach I think who probably could have succeeded with that was a kind of a meme comment in our live chat, which was Bob Lilly could save Miami. Unironically, I think that Bob Lilly is the only coach in the USL who could have actually gotten a lot of results. I say a lot more results out of this Miami team. So I think there is a part of a Las Vegas fans that say you can't take Miami with anything because it was Miami and it was just a dumpster fire trying to just play the youth because it's cheap. But if you're a Las Vegas fan, you're also going to say we went from Sanchez to this, and we have not one but two record transfers, and they were both sells. And what are you left with? What can you tell yourself if you're a Lights fan to make yourself excited for this?
I mean, if you're a Lights fan and you see Nocerino coming in, and obviously the track record is not good at all. Like, that Miami team is one of the most embarrassing things that's ever been put on the pitch in the USL. But at the same time, he's somebody who wasn't afraid to play the kids. They played U21 players more than 4,000 minutes in Miami. And they actually got some academy players to really grow. They got Rocco Genzano, somebody who they recruited from Italy, to really come up and find himself. Nocerino, for all you want to say about the quality of that team, found players roles where they could really grow their game. And I think that's something important for the way that Las Vegas has positioned themselves going forward. I think the other thing with Nocerino is that the style of play, he has one. Let's be real about that. Like, there are a lot of managers in this league that are almost mercenary in the way they want to set up. It was a lot of back three. It was a lot of trying to build out from the back and letting those players kind of play around with the ball. And Miami just didn't have the talent to do that. Las Vegas does. Say that you're getting Malik Howell the ball at the back, saying that Jones, who they're going to loan in from Colorado, those are players who are talented with the ball at their feet. We often saw Gennaro Nigro drop deep or drop in like an added central midfielder under Dennis Sanchez. This team has the skill set to kind of do what Miami never could have done for Nocerino. At the same time, like, you're bringing back the core of Valentin Noel. I think Knight Pickering is a forward who is kind of at put up or shut up time. Like, if he can take the step this season, they're going to give him the runway to try to do it. Patrick Leal, who they just added from New England, is somebody who put up unbelievable numbers in MLS Next Pro. There's talent here. There's a semblance of a system if you kind of dig under the hood a little bit with Nocerino. I'm not going to tell you this is what you want to see if you're a Las Vegas fan, but giving up all hope now when we're still early in the offseason and early into the Jose Bautista project, I would advise against like dropping everything and panicking.
Yeah, and we've seen this from managers in the past where they just don't have the personnel that really wants to have them play that style of football, but it doesn't have to discredit their tactics entirely. Yeah, I think it's interesting that they went with Nocerino here, just considering the fact that Miami had 3 wins on the year. It reminds me of when Las Vegas went through in 2023, who also had 3 wins on the season. But I don't think it's time to completely throw away all hope for Las Vegas right now, especially after you had these 2 major sales that you could see that money getting reinvested into better players to further upgrade the team. So I think, especially at this point in the season, in the preseason, trying to get to the start of the year, let's just wait and see how the remainder of their transfer business goes, how they look in preseason before we start casting judgment.
I think honestly, Paz Nocerino, I think the bigger question is how do you replace Hafferty and Corey Bennett? I think those are the bigger deal for Las Vegas right now because those are just massive, massive holes that you just, what are you supposed to do with it?
I mean, with Bennett is somebody who's an interesting case. I was frankly somewhat low on him coming out of Charlotte. Like, he'd shown a lot of potential, but especially in 2023, the goal scoring really wasn't there for him. And I think they just found the right systematic fit where he was able to do his thing as a number 9 and really thrive. Baby Knight Pickering is that guy within the Nocerino system. And I think if you look at Miami as a template, not in terms of the success, but the usage of a forward line of 2 or 3 forwards who are quite mobile, who are good about getting out on the counter, I think Pickering has the ability physically to run that system quite nicely. And he can be kind of that blend of maybe the Frank Lopez and Alan Gavilanes mold that we saw with Miami. He's got something of an in-betweener skill set that ought to do well. I think Hafferty, the thing with him was the versatility for sure. Like if you wanted to push Sean Smart upfield, Hafferty could be right back. If you needed him in the back line, he was solid there. But he's not someone who was maybe definitional for what the Lights were doing. Both of them, to me, feel like they can be replaced. I think, and we saw it in the comments, JC Ngondo is really the player that is a big deal to be losing. An all USL second teamer last season. So good with the ball in the midfield. Can Leal be that guy? Remains to be seen. I quite like Giovanni Aguilar as well, somebody who started the first game last season before going down with an injury. There's a lot of pieces here that are exciting. It's just going to be how do they coalesce?
And at least on the bright side, Las Vegas finished 4th last season. And like John said, they're returning a lot of that kind of same core. If you look back from the 2023 season to 2024, you tend to see teams who finish highly, or at least in a playoff spot, to return to that spot in the following season. If you're looking at teams in the Western who stayed in the Western Conference both years, 5 of the 8 playoff teams who made it in 2023 made it back in 2024.
And I want to just start off this part and just say I have nothing but love and like respect for Martin, who is out in Las Vegas, but 2 days in a row of record-breaking transfer deals. I feel like you can't do that twice in 2 days. I feel like you have to choose one.
Flaunt it if you got it. You're breaking the record 2 straight days, man.
Fair enough. There's a couple of questions in here that I want to get to in the chat, and I want to hit one of them later, and one's from Luciano, and I want to hit that one later. But first up, with John Fuller, because it's on topic, does Nocerino leaving Miami make both Vegas and Miami better?
I mean, I don't think there was any way for Miami to get worse, right? So yes,
Sure.
by like mathematical impossibility, sure. I don't think there's a way to argue that Nocerino, from the sample size we've seen, is better than Dennis Sanchez. When you consider the other options that the Lights had, there's also a bit of a feeling of, man, it's a bold call to go with this coach who's got one real bad season on his resume versus a number of managers who have done it in pretty harsh conditions with budgetary issues, problems on the club ownership side, or coaches who have a long tenure in the USL Championship. And you're going with the guy who got you 11 points in 34 games. But hey, I mean, that's why Jose Bautista is making the calls and Leonardo Neglia is making the hires, right? Like they have a sense that Nocerino can be that guy. So they certainly believe in Las Vegas that he's making that team better.
Well, let's go ahead and move on because we are reaching, honestly, in a couple days, and really probably starting tomorrow, we are hitting the quote-unquote unofficial USL signing day kind of thing because we are having players reporting for preseason, and that means signings are about to come heavy and fast. Get ready to start posting quick, John. And I want to start off with, honestly, the coolest signing that we could have gotten from this offseason. And I am talking, and if you missed it, I am talking about Greenville Triumph. They have signed Camden, a 7-year-old from Make-A-Wish Foundation. He is getting his own signing day. And there's some of the stuff, if you didn't read the article that the Greenville Triumph posted, Rick Wright, the head coach of Greenville, said they couldn't be more excited to fulfill Camden's wish and sign him to a contract with the Triumph. He said Camden's positive energy, drive, and ability to overcome adversity are important qualities we look for in our players, and they will serve him well on and off the field for years to come. On top of this, he is going to be designing the kits that they or the warm-up kits that they will be playing in, or sorry, they will be warming up in against Spokane Velocity on March 29th. And there are quotes from GMs and from his parents and stuff like that of saying, we're excited for him to join the Greenville Triumph and this opportunity for him to play soccer on a bigger stage and stuff like that. And it's just awesome to see out of Greenville to sign Camden. And congratulations to Camden on your signing day.
Yeah, and I mean, adding a forward, who needs Liam McKinnon? Excited to see the Camden era starting for the Triumph.
Yeah, this is just incredibly exciting news and just a really wonderful decision from Greenville to pick up one of the marquee players in the transfer market.
I do think that something that's important when you see a signing like this is don't forget it wasn't too long ago when we saw that Ronaldinho was, signing into the club. So when you get an investment like that, it's no doubt that when you're getting a forward talent like this, you're going to want to join Ronaldinho's club, even if it is in the third tier of the U.S. Bring a talent like that home. Bring a homegrown talent like that home. Hey, good on Greenville Triumph for making this happen. It's a no-brainer.
Yeah, things you love to see.
So let's go ahead and go to the championship. Why don't we? There are a lot of signings we can talk about. There's just a whole lot of stuff, and I'm going to spam it into the chat if you're in the live stream. And as always, I'll put it into the chat down into into the description I got there. And we're going to look at this kind of transfer tracker and just kind of look at what has really caught our eye in the championship. Now, there have been some moves out of the Super League, some really nice moves out of the Super League, and we do want to discuss those at some point. But as we are kind of into the slow drip of the Super League, as much as I do want to talk about Riley Mattingly Parker going over to Carolina because I love her with my entire heart, I can't spend the entire 10 minutes talking about that. So,
and hey, real quick, if I was late to this podcast because I was recording another podcast, so go check out RBL Our Son if you want to hear everything about those Super League transfers.
Yes, please go check them out. What about some signings that have caught your eye? Because there have definitely been some interesting ones and some marquee names leaving. Some of them that caught my eye of people who left the league altogether. Turcic and Marlon Santos both went to the same team in like Iraq or Iran. I don't know. There's just some
no
team
idea. That's awesome.
There was just some team in Iran that watched Memphis and said, we want those guys. And they did. And they went out and won their first game. And they are, I don't know, it's fun. But those are two names that are off the free agency list. So what free agent signings have you guys seen that have really caught your eye?
This one almost feels like I'm cheating, but hear me out, that Burton Jackson returning to Pittsburgh is a gigantic deal.
Yeah.
Like, obviously, he was unreal in that 6 or 7 games he had on loan at the end of last season. But when he became a free agent, when I think Real Monarchs let him go, there was a real question of, is Pittsburgh going to spend the money to sign a player that presumably had a lot of USL interest? And so to get him back and to have that option for 2026, gigantic for this team, just given the offensive spark he provided and the kind of different facet he brings to Lily Ball that arguably we haven't seen someone with that level of dynamism since probably Russell Cicerone was in the team. So yeah, massive to get him back for Pittsburgh.
I think. Ron, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to kind of move on to a different transfer if you want to add on to it.
No, go ahead.
So one of the ones that really, I guess it's just a looser conversation that I want to have is, hey, I love League One to championship signings. I think that they need to happen more. I think some general managers need to get their head out of their tail, basically, and realize that some of those players are better than the players on your own team because they're great. And, Stefan Lukic is a great signing for FC Tulsa out of Chattanooga. But is there anyone from Chattanooga left? I mean, the Red Wolves, it's sad. It's almost sad at this point. They are living up to the Sad Wolves moniker because it's every player that has ever been in the forward half of the lineup, they are gone. They just don't exist anymore with the team.
Lukic is somebody who, obviously, between NoCo and Chattanooga, he's been a real grinder of a player. Like, he knows how to throw his body around. He's good in the right wing. He can play striker. I think it's that ability to kind of sniff out opportunities around goal and to get into good positions that makes him a player that's kind of easy to underrate, but is constantly effective. And I think it's a really good piece of scouting for Tulsa, who clearly is paying attention to League One, to pick up a player like Lukic. I don't know if he's going to be a day one starter, but he's somebody who's going to find minutes and earn minutes because of that sensibility he brings. In general, with Tulsa, like, you love everything they've done this offseason.
Oh, yeah.
Khalil and Medkar to kick it off signing wise, Lamar Batista as well into the defensive line. And then, of course, Caleb Sewell coming in as, I think, sporting director and GM both. That feels like a big step for the way that this team is going to be run. Like, last season was a transitional one, to be sure, but really it's been a transitional 3 or 4 years in Tulsa. This feels like, with Luke Spencer on the sideline, with Mario Sanchez kind of doing technical director things, and then Sewell completing the triumvirate, something that Tulsa can finally build on for more than just 1 year. And you like to see the core that they're putting together alongside that front office personnel. So big ups to Tulsa for what's been a huge offseason for them.
Yeah, and for a Tulsa team who finished just 4 points out of a playoff spot, they're very easily able to flip that to being in the heart of a playoff race this season. And they open the year with 4 of their first 5 games at home, which could be massive for them starting the season off on the right foot.
Some other transfers that have happened, I know we're kind of speaking about free agency, but like I kind of mentioned at the top of this segment, the free agency pool is about to, that bubble is about to burst within the next 3 days because of these preseasons starting and medicals getting going. Like, that bubble's about to burst out, unless you're Lexington, who just continues to announce players. I don't know. I guess they refuse to do medicals. They just do not care. They weird me out. Although Juve apparently leaving, which is fascinating. They have to be getting money for him if he's leaving. I think the biggest news here is Wilson Harris. He's going over to Israel, and in general, the transfer was a bit bizarre because he and the club he went to announced that he was signing about a day or two before Louisville City announced it. And I have, because I was kind of following along when Marlon Santos went to Israel about 3 years ago. Israel. Oh my gosh, Israeli. There we go. I got there. Clubs kind of announce things fast before the other teams do. It's just kind of a weird thing that they just kind of do. It left Louisville City in a weird place where fans were like, is this happening? Is this not happening? Is this just them putting, cart before horse? Like, what's going on? And obviously you had the natural succession in Philip freaking Goodrum. I feel so sorry for Louisville City fans. They have to replace Wilson Harris with Philip Goodrum. I hate it for him. But it's still a shock if you're a Lou City fan.
No, definitely. And I was talking to people who think it might have been the process of selling him and kind of rushing that announcement might have been sped along by just the reporting about the story. And Harris is somebody who's a real success story for Louisville City. He came in, obviously, with kind of that tweener status where He was killing the game for SKC too, and he couldn't get the MLS minutes to really keep furthering his career. And Louisville City made him the guy. Like he was there anchoring the line, really kind of leading that youth movement of, yeah, you've got the Winder brothers, obviously, Carlos Mogul, but you're also bringing in players like Harris and Ray Serrano. And Harris was really at the vanguard of that. He blossomed into somebody who not only was going to score goals, but contribute defensively. I thought he really developed as a runner without the ball as well. And you saw that constantly in 2024. It's a deserved transfer for him and a deserved reward for the club to get something back for him. And exactly, that's why you go out and get Philip Goodrum. Our friend Nicholas Murray, who's in the chat, wrote a very good piece for the league talking about the fact that, I mean, that's a huge deal to have Goodrum waiting in the wings. And frankly, you kind of figured that when they went out and paid a interleague record to go get Goodrum, there was a reason for it. Like he wasn't just going to be the number 2 behind Harris for a long time. So we're going to see what happens next season. But I think Goodrum has the exact skill set and certainly has the track record of success that ought to make Louisville City fans excited.
Yeah, and you're just seeing a lot more from Louisville City who know how to do player management in terms of transfers, planning out their squad for many years. Within that same article that Nicholas Murray pointed out, there are 4 players who are still on the roster from that 2021 USL Championship playoff team that speaks to the longevity of this team, that Louisville City, their plans work in years rather than just let us get through the end of the season, then we'll reevaluate. So it's a really impressive move from a team that I think Louisville fans should not be concerned about finding their footing again for the upcoming season.
When we are talking about other transfers that kind of stick out, for me, the one that I really love, and it was reported kind of early about 2 weeks ago, I think ish, but yet it still sort of crushed my soul when I saw it, was, and I say this firmly as a Birmingham Legion fan, I mean that in that way, but it makes me excited as just a fan of watching these teams. Johnny Clean to Charleston is just so perfect, and it makes me want to throw up.
Charleston is reloading in like a major way between him, what they've got with Douglas Martinez, what they've added defensively, depth-wise with Blackstock and Ekponono. There's not a spot on this team where you feel like somebody could get injured and they're not going to drop off one iota. There's competition at almost every spot. You just feel like the Battery are going to be back and be a force in the East again next year.
Yeah, I mean, we'll be looking at, again, I think Charleston is going to be top 2 in the Eastern Conference like they've been last season and the year before.
What about some others? I mean, we could probably look at, well, everything that is Lexington, because I do really like what Lexington is building, but without knowing for sure what kind of system they're going to put onto the pitch, especially with Jeff seems to be moving on. What can you expect? I mean, we can guess based on what we saw with Oregon State, but again, that's just a guess. What else is standing out to us?
I think the Juve thing is interesting because, yes, he was a key player for that team, but he's also somebody who was kind of up and down when he did get the run in the championship. And moreover, they've got 5 other attacking midfielders signed already. And the thing is, like, you don't go out and get somebody like a Midence from Central Valley, who's the reigning, I think, League One Young Player of the Year, and maybe the assist leader as well. I think both of those things are true. Like, that's somebody who's going to demand minutes. Elliot Goldthorpe, from the conversations I've had with people in the know, like, they think him coming over from Vancouver is going to be a day one difference maker for this team. Marcus Epps isn't signing in Lexington unless he's going to get some real minutes there. So I think that in terms of the attacking group, they're going to be fine without Juve. To me, given the depth they've got in central defense right now, it feels like it's going to be a back 3 for this team. And with someone like a Danny Barbier and with Joe Hafferty, who we mentioned earlier, you've got the players at the wide spots in that setup who can really do damage, who can carry the ball. Kendall Burks, we had the proof of concept last season with San Antonio. If you want somebody at the heart of your defense who's just going to clean up any and all danger, there's not a better player in the league to do it. For me, I think you still need some depth at striker. Like Cameron Lancaster, he's that dude, but it's 2025 and you kind of need to have a succession plan in place. So somebody who can compete for minutes and displace him, sort of in the style that we've seen with Charleston, right? So if you're Lexington, continuing to add that one or two more pieces that this team needs to get over the top. But by and large, like I think that they're ready to kind of recreate what we've seen from Boss traditionally across those other steps of a team that's pressureful, that's playing a pretty modern possession game. I'm excited to see how it pans out in practice.
Yeah, it's been a Lexington team that has approached this offseason with the seriousness of moving up to the USL Championship that it's been required. They're not just simply bringing up what was the USL 1 team. They're bringing up parts of their USL 1 team while also adding in those key figures to make them competitive here for the championship. We spoke about it earlier for Las Vegas about Joe Hafferty being a club record transfer. You don't come up to the championship and throw around that level of money to just have it be like not taking this seriously. You add in a veteran leader in Speedy Williams coming in, as well as someone who's familiar with this league as well, who can kind of help set the tone for the championship. That it's going to be an incredibly interesting season for Lexington ahead. And the only question mark is how are they going to cope with the travel of playing in the Western Conference?
I just want to quickly pivot because I just need to get this off of my brain. One signing that has been raising eyebrows for me is Tristan Henry going to Phoenix, who Tristan Henry is he's a guy that I feel like can fit what Rocco Rios Novo did decently. Not as well as Rocco, but really no one in the league besides maybe Coque Vegas did it as well as Rocco did. But Tristan Henry, he kind of fits the mold. He can do the things. Good shot stopper. Kind of got a chance in Memphis. Didn't fully take it, but it was okay. I do just need to share this, and this is totally me being around actual teenagers every single day. Apparently, Tristan Henry, according to Transfermarkt, got his start at Sigma FC. And that just threw me for a loop. That just had to make me stop for a little bit. There's some people who are listening to this who have teenage kids, and they're like, there's a lot of brain rot going on right now. And yes, that's just where I am right now.
That gagged me, man. That took me out. I will say with Tristan Henry, obviously Phoenix won't be the same team we saw last season. But something somewhat unique about Phoenix is that they really try to keep that institutionalized philosophy to the way they play the game. So even if it is a different coaching staff, even if it is a different goalkeeper, they're trying to keep the ball on the ground. And what we saw from Tristan Henry for, I think, 5 years in the Canadian Premiership is that this guy is very good with the ball at his feet, a good short passer, accurate. We even saw a bit in Memphis too, where they'd have him kind of step out into possession, almost Coque Vegas style, and become that added player at the base of the setup. So for Phoenix Rising, it's a natural fit. And obviously the shot stopping has been excellent for Henry over the years. It was good in Memphis when he got the chance to play as well. He's somebody who's going to bring in some veteran leadership for a team that's signed a lot of players who are kind of young prospects, many of whom are coming over from Next Pro and especially North Texas. Feels like a good steadying hand to have around for Rising.
Yeah, and you have Pamadou Ka as their new manager coming in for Phoenix Rising, someone who had managed in the Canadian Premier League opposite Tristan Henry on a few occasions as well, whenever they would meet in their matches up there. And he's been a rising star within the coaching ranks for quite some time. That Phoenix should feel pretty certain with him at the helm and the players they're currently bringing in that the year should be better than what we saw from 2024.
You know, I'm just kind of sitting here and someone did throw in the Miami FC and, just kind of the comment of, there will be Miami trial players making up the season's roster to be bottom feeders. They announced a player returning like today or a couple days ago. Dalton Knudsen,
Knudsen.
is
He played like 30 games. He was, I think, maybe their most used player. Don't quote me on that, but he's good-ish.
I just don't. If you're Miami, and obviously we're getting to the time where free agents are about to be signing, is Miami about to kind of become last chance U of the USL in terms of USL championship players?
And just to address a comment about is Lopez still at Miami? We don't know who's at Miami. I think Miami's announced one returning player right now, so they're just like the mystery box of the league. I have heard, from what I've heard, like I think it is really the last chance you kind of thing. Like they're signing guys who were out of favor. They've shown things in the past, but maybe haven't done it consistently enough. It's certainly going to be a team at the end of the day. But yeah, I'm excited to see how they pan out in 2025.
Honestly, we should go based off of Kaler's recommendation where we just, whoever is leading Miami right now, we just keep them in a room and just cameras, you have 30 days to build a team that makes it to the second round of the USL playoffs. Go.
It was Phil's idea last year for Vegas. Someone missed out on a Lifetime documentary. We have the chance to recreate this in the funniest way possible. Also,
make me GM, and then we can make some content out of this. Here we go, Miami.
I mean, hey, if
Also-
we're seeing people do these 24/7-hour streams on Twitch, there's a way we can monetize this and make it an actual concept.
I Show Speed shows up to be the GM of of the Miami FC. Also, North Carolina announces their returners, and I mean it looks like a good group. And these are mostly guys that were already announced as multi-year deals. We just needed proof that North Carolina was breathing, and we got that. I want to preface this with signings are coming. Yes, signings are coming. And North Carolina is a team that does like to promote within a good bit with the academy, at least to make up the 18, maybe get a few minutes at time to time. But it everything you've heard off the field from North Carolina this offseason, this being announced so late that your multi-year guys are indeed coming back, that bodes zero confidence for me personally.
I mean, I think at a certain extent, it's like a matter of social media strategy. Some teams want to be more forward and active about it. Some teams are North Carolina. This core is a core that we saw make the playoffs last season. I think John Bradford had a very strong identity with how he wanted that team to set up. And almost all of the pieces, except for Lamar Batista, are back and ready to run that system once again. Obviously, you want to see North Carolina invest and add some pieces around the edges. I think it will be telling if they actually do so and the caliber of free agent they're bringing in after they really tried to make a statement heading into 2024 when they were making the jump. But overall, like, yes, you can say, I wish the communications were a little bit more timely, but I'm choosing to kind of trust what I'm seeing on the lineup card rather than trying to read the tea leaves of when and how they got the news out.
Yeah, I think it's just we get into this really challenging part of the preseason slate where there are teams who want to be forthcoming, who want to announce signing every day, a la like a Lexington. Then you get to teams who are just going to kind of really slow roll it into the year. I think I saw on a Blue Sky earlier today, someone was mentioning that the Richmond Kickers would have a lot of gaps in between their posts of time. Like I think before they had posted earlier today, they'd went 9 days previously since their last post. So yeah, we're getting into that kind of point of the season where there are teams who are just kind of approaching things differently. We're going to see a lot of my favorite trialists, if you will, who are competing in any of these preseason games. So really it just comes down to just because you're not seeing something happening online doesn't mean something's not happening behind the scenes. I do at least want to give a shout out for North Carolina to dump Ticketmaster to go to apparently a ticketing service that doesn't have any ticket fees. Jump, they had announced that primarily for the NC Courage, but obviously North Carolina's built in with that as well. So yeah, that's another at least impactful signing for their fans.
Before we move on to a little bit of League One and then hit our favorite free agents that are still left. And again, precursor, some of these free agents have already signed, but for the point being, we're just going to kind of
And
act
you
like
know
they
what?
haven't.
I would go out on a limb, and I have very little insider knowledge. I would guarantee that probably 90% of the people we talk about will have signed, which is what's so fun about this whole process.
That they are signed. We're just acting like they haven't. And before anybody DMs us, it's like, well, we know they
And
signed.
we
It's like,
we have
great.
no idea. Like we personally we're idiots. We don't know. But yeah.
Yeah. I kind of want to go to a question from Luciano, which was many teams in the leagues are new, including especially League One right now, and they haven't existed until recently. Do you see any budding rivalries going on this season? And I want to just jump in here and say I think we're going to see, especially um with the Jägermeister Cup, I think you're going to see a ton of rivalries pop up cross league. I think there's going to be teams in the championship who are going to hate League One teams, and it's going to start early. And I think it's going to be really fun to see.
You think about like Greenville and Charleston, teams that are fairly close to each other and both are extremely well run. Like that's going to be a killer matchup that you get to see from the beginning. I'm excited to see everything Texoma. Like obviously that's a team we know very little about right now, but getting them on the field against clubs that are pretty proximate is going to be so fun to see. I don't know if Ulta and Orange County play, but again, like same energy there. Getting that local rivalry across the levels, that's going to be fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, you have Alta and Orange County in the same group for the Jägermeister Cup. But yeah, I mean, if you're going to look at other matchups, you see Portland Hearts of Pine up in the Northeast trying to make a lot of noise coming in and competing with the team that won the Eastern Conference in Rhode Island. You see a Hartford team who doesn't want to get shown up by Westchester, who doesn't want to get shown up by Portland Hearts of Pine to come into the league as well. The one that I have at least circled is you're going to see a Louisville Lexington matchups this year that are going to be really interesting because for the first time since FC Cincinnati was in the league, Louisville has a very close nearby team who's going to be a thorn in their side as well. Oh, in addition to Indy 11, that it's going to be a team that's going to be always kind of looking over their shoulder and saying, it's like, what are the guys across the state doing?
I think one thing that is going to be really fun, and I think it's Group 5, maybe. It's the one that has Hearts of Pine, Westchester, Detroit City, Pittsburgh, Rhode Island, that whole thing. If you are talking about teams that are just going to be really fun to watch play each other, I mean, these Rust Belt cities versus Rust Belt cities, there's something about it that does just kind of create rivalries amongst themselves. And yes, we think that the whole like, oh, they're from Maine, they're like just so super nice and all that kind of stuff. Like the Northeastern sports fandom is as vicious as it gets. When we talk about like vicious fans, right? We think about your Northeastern teams, right? And I think that you're going to see some Rust Belt versus Northeastern teams where they're going to really get under each other's skin, and it's going to be a lot of fun. I think in the same thing, and I think where you're really going to see some of this hatred pop up is going to be in League One, and we're going to move there in just a second. But League One, where you're going to have teams that are going to play each other a lot because the league is pretty small, and they're going to play each other again in the Jägermeister Cup, and there's a chance they'll play each other again in the US Open Cup. You are going to see League One teams start to like really get into beef like it's COVID. We have 4 teams in a division kind of matchups. They're going to play each other like 4 or 5 times, and depending on the playoffs, 6 times in one season. It's going to be magical in terms of rivalries.
We'd be remiss if we didn't mention the return of the El Paso Union Omaha rivalry as well.
That's where I was going. Yeah.
And that leads me right into League One because Dom Casciato signs a new deal with Union Omaha. And I said this before, for this to be a successful offseason for Union Omaha, lock that man up, give him whatever he wants, because he is not walking out the door unless it's with a nice little transfer fee, or it's you are walking out the door of your new stadium onto the field in your championship season. There's no other way this can go. And I think already at this point, it's just a highly successful season for Los Bujos.
I do think it's always interesting when a club feels the need to say, we've extended the coach. Like, I think so many clubs just kind of don't do that on the regular. And for Omaha to be aware of the fact that kind of everybody was watching the Dom Casciata situation, and knowing that in an offseason where, let's face it, Omaha is always losing players because everyone wants somebody who's come up under Casciato. But for them to come out and say, listen, no matter what, we've got Dom back, that's a statement of intent. And you're absolutely right, Kayla, to say, like, that's a win of the offseason no matter what. Even if this team regresses a little bit from what was a historically strong 2024, you trust the process, you trust the system, and you know this team is going to be there when it comes to October.
When looking at other teams, we can talk about the expansion teams, and I do want to. But for me personally, I think if I'm looking at this most improved team, how can you not turn your eyes down south and look at South Georgia Tormenta and what they are building early on? They went from what are they doing for about 2 years after winning a championship to you better watch what they're doing, because the roster that they have constructed at the moment is impressive, and it's only going to get better.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about, like, Austin Pack, a statement in and of itself, that's the best goalkeeper in the league for my money, that you're getting to replace that kind of Drew Romig, Ford Parker platoon that was okay, but statistically looked quite poor on paper, and getting somebody who's rock solid and can hold down and play every single game if you need it. Defensively, I love the Jackson Casanzu signing. You might know him as Simba from his San Diego Loyal days. Somebody who's still only 21 years old and has a ton of potential to grow at Tormenta. Anatoly Prepolita as well, a player with some next pro experience who you figure is going to pair next to Casanzu in that back line. And then Gabriel Alves kind of rounding out the defensive additions. Alves, we've praised a ton on the show. He's good at left back. He can play as a central midfielder, very technical, very heady in his game. Those four players alone give this team such a defensive base that's going to set them up for success upfield. You just really love to see them committing to that area of the pitch, which was a real need entering the offseason.
And you mentioned Prepolita, who has time getting called up for the Moldova national team. You also have a player in Neil Reed Stefan as well, who's been called up for the Barbados national team as well, who recently scored in October or in one of his 20 appearances for the national team. So what Tormenta is building is something that is approaching getting back to that same level that won them a championship.
And on top of that, you're looking at a player, Taylor Gray, by the way. If you have not seen his film from Nisa, and I can't speak for his MLS Next Pro film because almost all that stuff is hidden kind of behind like Apple or just elsewhere. And I don't have Apple Plus, so I can't see that. But if you watch his Nisa film, he was one of the best offensive players in Nisa when he was in that league. And according to all accounts, he became even more well-rounded as just a player as he got older. For Tormenta to get him, there's your goal scorer and assister. You've been looking for the guy for a little bit, and honestly, he seems like the right replacement for Corey. You were wondering how could you replace that kind of player? I think you get it with Gray.
And Gray's somebody who kind of brings the effort no matter what. Like, he's got the defensive numbers and the pressing numbers on top of the fact that he had 9 assists in Next Pro last season. That's the kind of player that can really set the tone for this team in a way that they didn't have last season. Like, Pedro Fonseca was obviously the superstar attacking wise for this club, but whether he could get engaged, how they were using him, never really was consistent enough to pay the bills. Gray feels like the guy you can plant your flag down with and say, okay, this is who Tormenta is running through. Yes, we've got Tunbridge flanking him on the opposite wing. Yes, Connor Doyle's creating from the center of the park. but we've got the guy who can break down a set defense, and that's a big deal.
So I want to just kind of loosely look at these other expansion teams and Texoma. They are just announcing that they have coaches right now, which again, they probably do have signings and they're waiting. But when you are looking at being a new club and you're looking at not just be to your own fans, but talking about a wider media that's covering your club. When you're announcing we have coaches here, when everybody else is announcing we have basically a starting 11 ready to go, it feels like they are way behind the eight ball, especially when you are looking at Hearts of Pine, when you're looking at a Westchester, when you're looking at AV Alta, when you're looking at FC Naples, who only announces signings at 5 o'clock in the morning. I mean, they seem like they're way behind, especially with these expansion teams. I think they're going to take it to the teams that are established. These look like great teams on paper.
It's an interesting dichotomy for me as I'm kind of looking at these rosters. I've been very vocal about the fact that I love what Alta is doing, but also at the same time, like, Alta's kind of leaning into the name brand in a way of like Ibarra and Apollon and Elijah Martin. Those are very good players. Those are veteran players. Are they going to do the job versus someone like Naples that has gone a little bit deeper with, I don't know, guys from Next Pro, some college graduates? It's a pretty diverse roster, but you trust in the shape of the roster build right now. I kind of just made this similar point for Tormenta, but if you look at Delgado in goal, if you look at Breck Evans and Jake Dengler in central defense, and now adding Chris Heckenberg in the pivot, this is a team that's got the defensive core that's going to keep them solid and allow for the chemistry to develop elsewhere. Like, that's a Naples team you can really believe in. So it's an interesting kind of give and take to the philosophy of how you want to try and build the roster if you are in an expansion situation.
So as we kind of wrap up League One sections, and there's a couple of players that I'm sort of interested in, but right now we're still just kind of waiting because there's just a lot of players who are still just kind of figuring out. One thing that I will say, because I'm just very intrigued by Hearts of Pine and Westchester in general. They have a couple of League One players in their build, but they are going from local university or kind of deep cut lower league somewhere else. And I find them fascinating because they are largely unknown quantities, which is terrifying if you're an expansion club, because if you want USL quality players, get USL players, right? And they seem to be pretty confident in what they're doing. I'm fascinated by them. But we got a pretty interesting question into the chat, again from Luciano. And if you want to add questions to the show, please join our live chat. We normally record on Tuesdays. Right now it's Wednesday. With it being the off season, it's just, it's kind of in the air. Once we get into the season, we'll have a more structured schedule going on. But it's which team in either men's league has the most to prove this season. Now, this can be a lot of things. This can be which team should win a championship, and their expectation is to win a championship. Which is it to prove that they are still competent? Which is to prove that they were legit? Which teams stand out to you in any way that you want to take that question?
I think New Mexico United is the first team that comes to mind for me. Last season was such a major step forward for that club in almost every way. And I think the way that Eric Quill was so central to the way that they improved, so central to the way that they kind of defined a philosophy, found the roster that really fit them and gave that fan base something to root for. That was obviously a great leap forward in Albuquerque. And now, can they repeat it? They've splashed the money to go get Dennis Sanchez, who you have to figure was their number one guy to come in and coach this team. They're doing good things with the roster, whether it's Luis Fernando, whether it's, I'm forgetting the name of the defensive midfielder they just loaned in from Dallas. Show me that it's replicable in New Mexico. The best organizations in this league can do it year in and year out. Like you've got your Louisvilles and your Tampa Bays that are constantly competitive at the top of the division. Can New Mexico United become that club? I think 2025 will say a lot.
For me, though, I'm going to take it in a slightly different direction and say the team that has a lot for me to prove this year is San Antonio. You have a team that's off the back of their championship in 2022 that has gradually stepped back kind of season after season to the point where their supporters group has just said they're not going to support the team for this year. And then you get San Antonio's ownership group trying to say that they want to upgrade Toyota Field coming into the season. I think it was about $1 million worth of upgrades. You part ways with Alan Marciana last season to bring in Carlos Llamosa here. And I think it really is kind of a season for San Antonio to win back the fan base, get fans back into Toyota Field to care about this team again, and also just prove that, hey, we're ready to be competent once more. And this is something you should start paying attention to again and start to care about again, because this really feels like a season of, if you can't get people on board, it might very well be a lost cause for San Antonio kind of moving forward.
Where my head went with this was straight over to Ford Madison, where they are still off the backs of more kits than playoff experiences or playoff appearances, right? More kits than wins. They had that whole thing going. And when you build a brand like theirs that is so social media heavy, you're going to get social media flack as well. They took the step. They took the step forward. They put together an amazing roster, and they are having to deal with an issue that they never really had to deal with before, which is they had such a good roster that other people want bits of it. What can Ford Madison do to not only stay where they are, but take the next step to not lose in the Jägermeister final, to make it to the USL League One final, to win one of those finals? Because that's where they are at this point. The expectation for them is to be a title contender. They are no longer the fun team that has the pink flamingos with the fun colors and the fun kits and kind of quirky on social media with Rose. What was it? Rose Cowbell? Was that it? Maybe.
Yes.
They're not just those quirky team anymore. They are a serious club. What are they going to do to maintain and grow that status? Because if they take a step back, I mean, I can't imagine the social media ridicule from it. Leonela Bessie, that was another good one of the cow names. Thank you, Nicholas. Yeah, I think for me it's Nicholas Murray. Yeah, I'm expecting Nicholas Murray to take a big step up this year. I expect him to do that. Just kidding. I love you, Nicholas. He's already at the top of the top. For me, it's Ford Madison. Also, I just want to throw it out there, not because of expectations. I just want Birmingham to be good. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you.
You guys are on the road. You've got some nice pieces in there.
I believe in it, but I believed in it last year, so I'm going to temper all expectations. How about some free agents that are still out there that are kind of catching your eye? The two that are really catching my eye, if I am, and this is not me speaking as a Birmingham fan and saying I want them to sign them, although one of them I really do. I'm looking at Panos Samarkakis, and then I'm also looking at a Demon Wegbo for me personally. I think that those are two players that one of them, Panos, you get a quality midfielder. Also, you get his dad, and who doesn't want that? And then with Deba, he's just a player who's a young talent who I think can really break out if he has the best opportunity given to him. I think that whichever team sign them are going to be so excited.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking in the same vein with Panos, especially. There are very few free agents out there who can really become the identity of a team. And I think we've seen with certainly Loudon when they had Panos, less of a degree with Phoenix, but they were still so successful. But Panos is the kind of player that can run an offense, right? like what we've seen with him as a number 10 in the middle of the park, as an inverted right winger. He's got creative flair and verve in a way that so few players possess. I think his work rate is quite underrated as well. I just think that no matter what you need out of a midfielder, Panos can provide it. There's a lot of attacking midfield talent. I kind of had my eye on two of the players leaving Colorado Springs with Jairo Henriquez and Tyreek McGee. Both of them so key down the stretch during the title run. Henriquez, and both of them really kind of bring you the flexibility to go out wide, to play centrally. I think McGee in particular, like full Jamaican international, lights up the pitch whenever he's available to play. He's going to be somebody that if he stays in the USL and doesn't move on to greener pastures, makes a massive difference.
And I'll say topical with the kit that I'm wearing tonight, and I'll be curious where the likes of Cal Jennings, Sebastian Guinzati, and both former Tampa Bay Rowdies, but Guinzati leaving Indy 11 and Aki Williams also leaving Indy 11 as well. Just you're going to see players who, like you've mentioned with AV Alta, they have that name brand that comes with them, that you're curious if that name brand still kind of carries the weight within this league, that a team maybe takes a punt on them, or they may consider going into League One as well, just to continue on their playing career. And we'll also just have to see if Christian Valesky continues the journey as well.
Just something, by the way, speaking of Indy, fascinated by Elvis Samo, by the way. I don't really know what it means because I don't think he's a starting caliber player at this point, but he goes through stretches where he's undroppable. I don't know. I'm fascinated by him at Indy right now. I don't know what it's going to mean.
Well, they've got Romario Williams and Elliot Collier in the mix already. I think the nice thing for Mo is that he doesn't have to be the guy. Like, he can just come in and contribute. If indeed Sean McCauley's kind of running with two strikers, that'll help his cause because he's better with a partner. At the same time, like, there's a real chance, given the depth in the midfield that the 11 have, that he's just more of a bench option. And I think that's the right way to, or the right mentality to come into the situation with if you're signing someone like Elvis Samo at this point.
I got a couple of questions in the chat, and then we're going to try to get out of here. Just some questions about El Paso and Monterey Bay. And I really want to hone in on El Paso because I was initially kind of excited that El Paso was frankly signing any kind of players of quality. And then John on Blue Sky, you kind of rightfully pointed out that it's oops all fullbacks, which was kind of their downfall last year on top of other things. But that really was a lot of their problems of, oh, our fullbacks are really good at going forward. They don't come back though. And that was just kind of their entire thing. How do we feel about El Paso's roster build right now? And do we feel like it's going to solve any of the problems they had last year?
It's very much a your mileage may vary situation. How much do you believe in what Wilmer Cabrera did late last season? Because they're running back a lot of that core at the moment. For me, when they added Ruiz and they got Coronado into the central midfield, things seemed to click. And El Paso, even if they didn't really look like a playoff team, were certainly competitive in a way that they weren't at the beginning of the season. And when you bring in Memo Diaz, when you back him up with Alvaro Quezada, that's a difference versus what we saw. Like, I think Diaz is never one to abdicate his defensive responsibility. Obviously a great crosser of the ball. Moreover, like adding Frank DeRoma into the central midfield, who's just pure ball winning skill, that's going to be huge for them. Obviously, we need a striker like Daniel Carter. Is it Daniel Carter? Yeah, Daniel Carter coming in on loan from Honduras. Very much an unproven quantity at the number 9 spot. You get one more player there to really nail down, hey, we've got a goal scorer, and I'm feeling a lot better about the Locomotive. As of now, I think there's still a team that's going to be sniffing the postseason at a minimum, though.
Yeah, and the big thing for El Paso, we talk about teams and their kind of start to the season, is they really don't have it easy to begin with. They open up hosting the league champions in Colorado Springs. They have Phoenix, they have New Mexico, Lexington, and Colorado Springs again as their first 5. That's really a tough slate to open things up. So it really will become a quick hit the ground running for Locomotive.
just one transfer that I thought was already done, and this is not me like announcing anything early. I mean, when I say this, I think I legitimately had a dream about this, and I just thought it was reality. I already thought Connor Donovan was already in Detroit. I just thought he was there. In my head, Connor Donovan was just there.
They're too busy adding multiple Monterey Bay players between I think Herrera and Maury Donor. They're just becoming like Monterey Midwest.
I mean, I guess people do say that about Detroit.
It's the Monterey of the Rust Belt.
Yeah. Goodness gracious. Any other players that we kind of want to talk about who are free agents that are really catching our eye? You could really just name all of Memphis except for Marlon and Turcic and Bruno Lapa, who are already gone to other places, but really it's just all of Memphis is available.
Yeah, I think Renzo Zambrano out of Phoenix, somebody I think can really do a job in a midfield somewhere. I've been hot and cold on him, and I've come around the more I've considered his game. Like I think he's got some of the box to box talent that I tend to miss, and he didn't tend to get to do with Rising. Connor Donovan, who you just mentioned, obviously, like another shout for kind of that center of your defensive line, cleaning up all the danger kind of player. So plenty of good options out there.
And before we go on to one last topic, do need to know, do you have a go-to cocktail, John?
I'm very much like a whiskey kind of guy with my cocktails. Like if I can just get something pretty simple, like a Manhattan or something like that, happy with it.
Fair enough. Something that kind of caught everybody's eye or I say everybody's eye, if you are still on Twitter, is that the OKC Energy FC Twitter page has asked, what should we name the OKC Energy? So I guess they're no longer the Energy.
That's kind of been the thing, is they want to get away from the old brand. So new colors, new team name, the whole 9 yards. I don't have any good ideas, but I love a good name contest. Like that was great fun in Milwaukee, and I'd love to see something dumb happen again.
Yeah, and it's opened up for the team in 2027. And if you're not obviously on that previous Bird app, they do have it on the USL subreddit as well for a direct link. They're posted so you could go through and submit your own name. Now, I'm not saying that I went through and submitted a name, but I will say the Oklahoma City Supersonics has been a name that has been submitted, and it would be awesome if a lot of people who would get behind that with another green and gold theme and everything. Now, again, I'm not saying I did that. I'm saying the Oklahoma City Supersonics has been submitted. So
there was a part of me that thought about putting in the OKC Roughnecks just to have a little bit of chaos. Honestly, I don't know what to do with it. I thought it was just interesting that they are getting away from it. And I guess it makes sense because they want a fresh start. But also, did you really need one? You took like 3 years away. That's enough fresh start. You don't have to put on new coat of paint and new name to do that, unless you just want to, sell new merch because, well, obviously.
I think there is some value to, I mean, new majority ownership group, a new stadium. It's really a fresh start for soccer in Oklahoma. That feels like a nice clean break from the past, because there might be some sour grapes in terms of, well, the Energy went on a hiatus. We didn't really know when they were going to come back. A little bit of bitterness. Feels like it's going to be something that really takes this club into a new era.
Let's see, what could we name them? The Tornado Alley Reed Timmers. If I submitted that,
That's good stuff.
I mean, it's a name.
It certainly is. Put that on a logo. Yeah.
All right. How about some final USL thoughts? Any USL thoughts that are just really burning?
Oh, the Indy 11 Stadium project, where
Oh yeah, let's talk about that.
yeah. So Indy has practiced at Grand Park, which is quite north of the city of Indianapolis, for a couple of years at this point. It's a very nice youth soccer facility and has been for quite a while. I used to live like a couple minutes away from it, so a little bit of bias. But the team and really the kind of like holding company that owns Indy 11 has now taken over management of that complex. And the city of Westfield, which is a northern suburb, has announced that there is a plan in development to build a 10,000 seat stadium up there. So the tea leaves seem to be that Indy 11 are going to move there. You would imagine that the women's league team would come in as well. So big things happening in Indy in the wake of what could have been a real disaster with the MLS shenanigans.
Yeah, and if we're going to talk about other expansion efforts, it's been kind of thrown around, obviously, on the subreddit as well, that Puerto Rico is being considered for another USL team, whether that was first brought up with Yadier Molina, catcher I liked in Major League Baseball, but did not like the team that he was playing for, but then also potentially adding in Bad Bunny as part of the ownership group as well. So developing story to watch if Puerto Rico would be able to gain a team back into kind of U.S. soccer, whether that's the championship or League One. It would just be exciting to have a return to the Caribbean for the league, and it's one step closer to bringing back Antigua Barracuda.
I was just kind of interested in what the flight would be like, because there was a little bit of conversation as we were looking through of some people just kind of bringing up Hawaii again. It's like, do you remember that one time, literally the one time when there was a USL team in Hawaii? And, you know, I kind of looked at flights, and the closest flight is like 7 hours from LA, which that is just for Orange County and Orange County only. Everybody else is even farther. Apparently, the average flight for Birmingham to Puerto Rico is like 6 hours, which is surprisingly closer than I thought it would be. So I don't know what that means. Maybe it's not as far-fetched than I thought. It's weird, but it's not as far-fetched as I thought.
As someone who thinks that I'm pretty decent with like world geography, I think I did not know how far away Puerto Rico was.
See, I thought it was farther than it was. I did not realize it was as close. I feel like we kind of went middle ground on each other.
Huh.
I don't know.
I feel like we embarrass ourselves with geography about every 2 months. We're right on time.
And by we, it's normally me. Let's be completely honest with ourselves.
I mean, looking as the crow flies on Google, it's 1,033 miles between Miami and San Juan.
I think this is my other problem in life. Like, if you tell me something is X amount of miles away, that means nothing to me. Like, that's just a big number, and I'm devoid of context.
I mean, I say if I remember right, I know this for a fact. It is like right beside the Dominican Republic and Haiti.
Yeah.
So like, and those aren't horribly far. I don't know.
This is a bad line of conversation. We're just making ourselves look like fools.
I will say, to have a comparison of what 1,033 miles is, that's Miami to Indianapolis.
Okay. How many movies did you watch on the flight?
Well, it's 6 hours for Birmingham to San Juan, so one extended cut of the Lord of the Rings. How about some final thoughts for the Knights, guys? Let's go with Ryan first.
Yeah, so earlier this week, I made it a goal within 2025 that I wanted to see more films that I've just have had on my Letterboxd list, but never got around to seeing. So I watched Tron Legacy earlier this week, and I was like, it was a lot of fun, and it amazed me that a movie that came out in 2010, the CGI and the visual effects look so much better than Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania that came out in 2023. That I mentioned that in my review on Letterboxd, and I was like, okay, this is a 15-year-old film, no one's going to respond. Apparently, like, the biggest Tron Legacy fan liked my post, and I was like, he's the guy who's rated the film 4.5 stars and has like a paragraphs upon paragraphs review of the film, and I was just like, wow, there really is someone dedicated to watching this 15-year-old Disney movie. But 4 stars if you follow me on Letterboxd. Tron Legacy was good.
What I will say about Tron Legacy is that if you just want to watch something that's essentially a Daft Punk music video, you're in for a good time.
And they do have a cameo in the movie.
That's right. Yeah, as a massive Daft Punk fan, yeah, that's my one tie to Tron Legacy.
Do we know what the people? Do we know who the people of Daft Punk is? Or is then like the part of the thing is like they're supposed to like go on forever?
No, they have real identities. It's Thomas Mangalter and it's Guy Man, Herman Christo. They're just like 2 French dudes.
I think they actually split up a few years ago as well.
They've retired the Daft Punk moniker for now.
Sure. John, how about you?
Yeah, I'm tired. Today was just long. I'm 2 hours into podcasting at this point. Boy, I'll tell you what. I had the best time rewatching Albert Hitchcock's Vertigo. It's something that people say is kind of like one of the greatest movies all time. Never really got it before last week, and I'm like all in. Can't stop thinking about it. Another movie with a great score, also. So, if you haven't seen it, go watch it. It's cool. It's fun. It's a very fun way to look at San Francisco in the 60s, if that's the way to get you into it.
I'm fascinated by that now. Now I feel like I need to see it.
Recommend. It's easy. Like most movies, you can get it online to rent for like $3. So
might need to do that this weekend. My final thoughts for the night are I am horribly embarrassed to say that after like this weekend doing the Montgomery United thing, I am hobbling around like a senior adult. I am so sore. It is ridiculous. I feel I've never felt so old and just, old in my entire life. Like I am just hobbling around. Everything is sore. Every part of my body is just aching.
This is my other recommendation. If you haven't gone and watched Taylor's video about this tryout, you got to go do everything about this because it's just terrific.
Appreciate that. Yeah, it was kind of crazy. The difference between the guys who were some of the best players on their D1 team and if you haven't been around someone who's a Division I soccer player, it is another level that you're not prepared for. And the guys who are going to end up making that team was ridiculous. It was an unbelievable gap between the two. I think this is also just my way of saying if you haven't gone out to watch a USL League 2 match, you definitely should because the talent level is significantly better than you think it is. Significantly better than you think it is. So, all right. Well, all of that to say, thank you so much for watching tonight. Thank you. If you're watching this on podcast players later, we do appreciate it. I'm going to try to be better about getting more updates on we will or we will not be streaming. Just live has been crazy lately. So just be patient, especially as we're in this off-season time. We're not as structured as we normally are. We're usually waiting for things to kind of happen for us to talk. So, it may not be as regular as always. But thank you all so much. We really do appreciate you. And for the first and final time tonight, here's Alan's voice.
Thank you for watching another episode of the USL Show. The USL Show is now proudly part of the Protagonist Podcast family. Please go to protagonistsoccer.com to check out more work. Thanks for stopping by, and we'll see everyone again next time.